Our last speaker before the panel is Natasha Petri. She's from Sanford Health, and she'll talk about implementation across multiple health systems, or multiple states in one health system, yes. Right?
Thanks, James. Thanks, everyone, for being here, and to the organizers for having me. So I'm going to discuss the implementation at Sanford Health. And like Amy, I have a clinical appointment, so I'm half-time academia and then half-time at Sanford. So there is just a couple pictures of our building that we have. We have our own Imaginetics building. And at Sanford Health, there's a lot of focus, obviously, like many health systems, multiple focuses. And I just want to highlight that actually one of the focuses at Sanford Health is genomic medicine. So we feel really fortunate to have support from the very top in some of these things that we're trying to accomplish. So just to give you a lay of the land a little bit, we do cover multiple states, and we have kind of multiple hubs throughout our enterprise, and our main kind of facility being in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but also two hubs, Bismarck, North Dakota, and Fargo, North Dakota, and then Bemidji, Minnesota. But we also cover into Iowa, Nebraska, and a little bit into Montana as our main clinical area, kind of the lighter gray within the darker gray. But with some world clinics, we also have presence in some other states. And so getting to the history and sort of the premise for implementation at our health system, it really came from the generous donation of a benefactor who our health system is named after, but he's very passionate about multiple causes, including genomic medicine and veterans also being another cause that's close to his heart. And I always just like to call out the name of our program. So it's Imaginetics, and often people think it's this cute Imagine genetics kind of play on words. But the idea for it came from the I and the M from internal medicine, the A from and combining that with genetics, because Mr. Sanford really wanted, with this donation for genetics, to be something that was accessible, to just the general patient coming in, and not like a specialty per se, where there's a long wait list. And he just really saw the value, especially in preemptive testing and housing it within sort of a primary care model. So there are also a couple more pictures of our Imaginex building, which houses our internal lab, but also has internal medicine and rheumatology. And so it does serve multiple purposes within the one building on our huge campus. Obviously, to build a program like this takes a huge multidisciplinary team. I'm not going to go into all of the individual specialties today, but certainly recognizing the expertise that they all bring to the table to help make our program what it is. And so I love Deepak's comment about, we need pharmacists for pharmacogenomics, because back in 2014, I had a provider say to me, well, once we get this program up and running, we're not going to need a pharmacist anymore. And that stung a little bit. So I like to include this slide as, a shout out to that provider to show our growth, actually, in that we have 6 pharmacists, 5 FTEs for PGX within our system. And we all have sort of specialized areas, but of course, cross coverage as well. And so when we founded Imaginetics, there was really 3 pillars that we wanted to build our program upon: clinical care, education, and research, with clinical care being our main focus. And of course, education is needed to implement within clinical care, and the importance of publishing findings as well. So I'll talk about mostly clinical care today and touch on the last 2 pillars quickly at the end. So within clinical care, and thinking we have this really large area to cover, and our health system is the result of multiple mergers. And so, we had Merit Care that turned into Sanford in Fargo, and Med Center 1 that turned into Sanford. And so all these different health systems that ended up turning into Sanford. So while we are one, there are still some differences across the site. And one thing that we were able to do really early on is get CYP2C19 on our order set in the cath lab in Sioux Falls. And so clopidogrel is their go-to in Sioux Falls, not Fargo. So within Sioux Falls, we'll find that in the cath lab. Some discussion, our cardiologists, especially in Sioux Falls, are all in on PGX. And so currently single gene, but a lot of discussion about maybe we switch this to panel preemptively, thinking about beta blockers and statins and some other implications. As far as initiatives that we have related to our panel, related to psychiatry, our group health plan for employees and dependents, we're going on a few years now of a pilot where anyone with the depression or the diagnosis, of anxiety and depression can have this panel covered for free. So whether they're controlled or not, we have seen that coming through quite a bit. Transplant, so we just heard about transplant from Amy. So in Fargo, we have a very interested and active transplant pharmacist and team of providers who wanted to establish the PGX testing prior to kidney transplant, and so we have that within our Fargo region. And then you heard Deepak talk about veterans, and so our collaboration with the VA, but also within Sanford Health alone, we offer free pharmacogenomics testing to veterans and military status. And then Medicare Align is a program offered through Sanford Health Insurance, and any of those patients can get a test covered for free as well. When we really started to ramp up our program, trying to think about the basis within primary care, we had our Sanford chip, and that had a PGX panel, as well as the patient could opt into a medically actionable predisposition screening based on ACMG 59. And this was a broad-based, really, you could be on 0 medications, you could be on 20, it didn't really matter as far as those specifics, but we were offering it for only $49. So our specifications were that they had to have a PCP within the Sanford system to be somewhat embedded, be 18 years old and older, and be able to speak English, because that's what the consent was in at the time. But through this sort of population screening, we were able to test around 18,000 patients. So we do consider ourselves kind of an end-to-end program. We have our own in-house lab, and this is kind of Amanda's area more than mine, but do like to call out that within our building we have our own lab that we work with. And so thinking about, well, we started back in 2014, and where are we now? So we've continued to refine our panel, make some additions, and then transition to targeted next generation sequencing most recently, and added a few more genes, as well as remove IFNL3. Now the 1416, currently we are operating off of the 14 gene. With the availability to offer the 16 gene, it's just some issues on the compliance and wanting a different a form of consent from patients. So we're slowly transitioning our way to 16, but the lab is ready to work with us on that. We also, in more recent history, developed our own report. And this is just kind of a highlight of a few pages, not expecting you to really be able to read the small print, but the standard sort of green, yellow recommendation columns, avoiding the red, just to, stop any misconceptions about when you would truly stop versus a warning. The report out page there in the middle of results, and then a page that calls out the RS numbers that we are sequencing. And on the first page, then, anything that falls into the yellow column after these pages, which I didn't screenshot for you, though, is that individual guidance on what to do. So we include that as well. And so for our clinical service, all of the pharmacogenomic tests that are run through our internal lab are reviewed by a pharmacist. And we write a note within our electronic medical record. If it's an actionable finding, we will route it to providers, or if the test has been ordered reactively, we'll also route that to the providers. We tend to route most of our notes to providers now that we've sunsetted the CHIP program, but when we were doing that preemptive program, there were a lot of just nothing that we found, so we didn't want to burden the providers with addressing like, hey, we reviewed this, we didn't find anything. And one of the things that we have learned through the process is these patients would get the test results, reported through the chart. Their provider knew, and they were never really aware or felt like they weren't informed about the findings or what was even happening with results. So one thing that we added on to our process then was sending a message through MyChart through the patient portal to say a pharmacist has reviewed your results, and if there's anything actionable, your provider has been notified, and you can follow up more with them, kind of sticking to the premise of keeping it within the provider's hands, and especially in primary care in many of those cases. So we review the results as they're returned, and then going forward, we rely on our robust clinical decision support that we have built with alerts and genomic indicators to keep things related to pharmacogenomics on the actionable, alerted to the providers that way. And we also have a pharmacogenomics clinic where we can see patients for post-test results only or do a pre and post-test visit model. And this has been, I think, really helpful as another way to support our providers who just don't really have the time or feel they have the expertise to address some of these findings. So speaking just a little bit more about our clinic model, given our large geographic area, we do have a couple models. We have an in-person option in Sioux Falls where a kind of a traditional clinic visit where they're roomed by a nurse. The nurse kind of reviews their medications and shows them a basic what's pharmacogenomics video. The pharmacist generally will come in next, do a research consent. We're looking to follow outcomes for patients that are seen in our clinic and also do some patient satisfaction surveys. Do a comprehensive MedRec and history, and then kind of do some PGX overview as well as education when the nurse practitioner comes in. Then generally in our inpatient model, the pharmacist will leave and the nurse practitioner then will finish the visit with an H&P. If it's a pretest model, can order that PGX panel, provide any referrals. Oftentimes we see a lot of psychiatric related patients, and so referrals for counselors are made. And then we rely on our nurse practitioner to kind of collaborate with the PCP or whoever the referring provider was. With our virtual visits, kind of very much the same premise, obviously, but it's over the computer through the patient portal. Pharmacist still does a MedRec and history, does PGX overview. However, the pharmacist and the nurse practitioner were logged on together and for the whole time. So really everything we kind of do is in conjunction and back and forth. I can't do a history and physical, obviously, but does a review of systems. And together we do that results education and consulting. And so we have pharmacist licensed in 4 states. Our nurse practitioner is in 4 states. So we can see patients across that region. Our results are in as discrete data. This is a screenshot of our old panel before we updated. So that it can easily interface, and it's under results review, laboratory results, genetics, so very easily accessible to anybody in the chart looking. Like I said, we as pharmacists review results that come through, so that triggers to us through our in-basket, a best practice folder, and you can see it alert us if it's a panel or a single gene to review. We also have a red arrow set to fire if it's something that we would want to address sooner than maybe any other results in there. For example, clopidogrel and a 2C19 intermediate or poor metabolizer. It'll flag a kind of actionable for us to deal with that right away. I mentioned genomic indicators, so here's a quick example of that located on our snapshot page and also a separate genomic indicators tab. And we have them medication facing, and this is for providers with a little bit more detail on what the implications are. Through the patient portal, I mentioned that we send them a message saying that a pharmacist has reviewed their results. Through this message, we also direct them on how to find their results. And then if they would like to schedule a visit with our pharmacogenomics clinic, they can self-refer or they can be referred by a provider. And then this is what it looks like when it comes through to the patient. We also have the genomic indicators in place that are patient-facing, and so this is going to be a lot more generic language with a warning, of course, don't stop taking your meds without talking to your doctor, and then discussion with your doctor may be warranted based on genetic results. This is populating for medications that we have alerts for, and so those are based mostly on CPIC with some FDA labeling that is actionable primarily based on safety a lot of the time, so it's not specific to their particular medication list. Just an example of our interruptive alert, we do have it branded with Imagenetics. We've anecdotally found that that does help kind of separate the alerts from the others that are the providers are seeing, and not all of them provide alternatives, but some of them do. We link out to the CPIC guidelines. They can click on that. When we reviewed that, we find probably I can count on one hand the number of times that people click on those links, but that's okay. They're there if they want them. We also have inline alerts. Oftentimes this is for something that has FDA label, or in the case of PPIs, which we know have a CPIC guideline, that was our most frequently firing alert. And with consultation from our CDS committee and providers, especially in that area, we moved that to an inline alert. And when we evaluated it, we found that it didn't really impact the prescribing changes from when it was actually an active alert. Quickly, education, we have done multiple in-services from the beginning, and we continue to do in-services at different departments for updates. We have an internal website that has multiple resources for our providers, pocket cards being one of them. I do want to call out modules. This was a really big success for us. When we were starting the program, providers have to do quarterly modules. They're tied to their compensation if they don't do them. And so we got 2 years worth of modules related to genomic education. And so providers at that time completed 8 modules, one on a quarterly basis. And that was huge for our education efforts. Externally, we do community lectures, have an external facing website, and have some other resources available. We also have our residency program. We believe in training the next generation of clinicians. We take pharmacy students, offer high school shadowing, PGY1 residents. We offer elective 4. And we also serve as a pharmacogenomics elective site for the NIH LGG fellowship. So for those who are interested as lab directors and learning more about pharmacogenomics, we offer a 2-week elective where I serve as a preceptor, kind of talking about the clinical implications of PGX. Very quickly, research. A lot of our research then kind of covering our last pillar of Imagenetics related to clinical decision support. We did a pile with MedRec before we reviewed our patient results, our implementation, our education efforts, and then some clinical research as well. So very quickly, kind of lessons learned. Technology certainly is in our favor, but can also be a barrier when we think about updates and lack of insurance coverage. We've heard a little bit about just cost in general today. Education initiatives, I think that this is a strength, but I think it's also a barrier for us as it's a continued battle, right? Communication across multiple disciplines. So we started with the focus on primary care, but you can see through some of our initiatives, we really do focus in on some specialties. We have a large physical distance of our health system, and then just maintenance of our program. We feel like we have a lot of strength foundation of education, implementation on evidence-based resources like CPIC, and strong support from administration, and as well as our clinical decision support and some other strengths as well. So thanks to my team at Sanford, specifically my pharmacogenomics team, and excited for the panel discussion.
Maybe just one question for Natasha while I call up the panel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Dana from Saudi Arabia. I would like to ask you, what's the turnover time of pharmacogenomic testing? Second, I would like to know the duration, since the patient will take the testing till a clinical decision is taken. So in case of clopidogrel, how long it will take?
Yeah, our turnaround time, generally a week with the panel. It's been a little bit longer transitioning to our new platform. And the alerts will fire upon any sort of order entry. So a new order or refill, that clinical decision support will fire. The what? It's automated. Oh, we don't automatically change it, but we do have the alerts that offer alternatives in a lot of cases.
Thanks. We have some time for panel discussion.